Fog curled low over the Thames that morning, drifting like pale silk through the narrow streets and settling over the city with an air of quiet expectancy, as though London itself held its breath for the opening of yet another relentless social season. Carriages rattled over cobblestones, footmen called out names in clipped tones, and every grand drawing-room hummed with anticipation of the alliances, scandals, and whispered triumphs that would shape the months to come. Among the hopeful yet cautious faces entering this gilded arena was Lady Sophia Aldridge, a woman whose poise seemed untouched by hardship, though her circumstances had grown sharply precarious since her father's death. Her family name still carried dignity, but her fortune had dwindled to the faintest echo, and society, ever hungry for something to dissect, watched her with sharpened interest. She carried herself with quiet bravery, each step betraying resolve stitched over wounds she refused to show. For Sophia had been raised not only to dance and converse with grace, but to endure humiliation with her chin lifted and her composure intact. The gathering at the Viscountess Elmore's estate signaled the true beginning of the season, a lavish garden affair where roses spilled over wrought iron arches and the most ambitious families paraded their daughters before the city's most eligible bachelors. Sophia moved among them dressed in soft ivory, the color lending her an ethereal glow beneath the morning sun. She smiled where she must, offering polite greetings and measured laughter that concealed the tension in her chest. Rumors had been swirling for weeks. Rumors that she was desperate for a match, that she would accept any gentleman who could restore her family's fallen fortune. She ignored the whispers with impeccable restraint, though each one felt like a small thorn pressing deeper beneath her skin. Still, she maintained grace, believing dignity was a currency worth more than any dowry. It was when the quiet murmurs shifted and spread like ripples across the lawn that she realized the Duke of Whitford had arrived. Edmund Harrow was a name spoken always with a hint of awe and a measure of fear. At 26, he had inherited not only immense wealth, but the equally weighty expectation of political brilliance. Society praised his discipline, admired his presence, and whispered endlessly about the fiancée who had betrayed him 2 years prior. That heartbreak had carved something cold into his character, sealing warmth behind an impenetrable exterior. He rarely smiled, never lingered in conversation longer than required, and held himself with the rigid formality of a man trained to view emotion as a liability. Sophia had met him only once before, though barely long enough to exchange names. Even in that brief moment, she had sensed the carefully built walls within him. Now, as he moved through the garden with purposeful strides, she felt again the sharp contrast between his commanding stillness and her own vulnerable elegance. Whether out of courtesy or sheer misfortune, their paths converged near a marble fountain. Sophia inclined her head in polite greeting, determined to maintain composure despite the tightening circles of guests around them. "My lord," she began softly, "it is a pleasure to see you again. I trust the season finds you well." Edmund regarded her with a look so cool it chilled the very air. "Lady Aldridge," he acknowledged, bowing the precise degree demanded by etiquette. His eyes flicked over her briefly, assessing rather than admiring. She felt the scrutiny but stood firm, refusing to let uncertainty betray her. For a heartbeat, silence stretched taut between them. Then, with a voice as crisp and emotionless as winter frost, he spoke. "I cannot imagine why you would address me as though closeness exists between us. Your intentions, I suspect, are transparent." Sophia blinked, taken aback. "I assure you, Your Grace, I had no intention beyond polite greeting." "Polite greeting," he repeated, almost scoffing. "A convenient guise. But I am not a man easily manipulated. Whatever expectations you may harbor, extinguish them. I have neither time nor inclination for such ambitions." Color drained from her cheeks. "Ambitions." He did not lower his voice, though guests stood within clear earshot. "Let's be plain, Lady Aldridge. You seek security, status, reassurance for your tarnished reputation. But you will not find it with me. You are not worth loving." The word struck her like a blow she had no defense for. A gasp fluttered through the assembled crowd. Fans snapped open. Gloves tightened around trembling hands. Sophia's breath hitched, but she forced it steady. She would not allow him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. The lessons of her upbringing, never show desperation, never reveal hurt, rose to shield her. "I see," she whispered, every syllable measured. "Then allow me to relieve you of any imagined burden, your grace. I sought nothing from you at all." She curtsied, and though her vision blurred, her posture remained flawless. Without waiting for permission or acknowledgement, she turned away. Each step felt like walking through water, slow and heavy, but she did not falter. Conversation around her rekindled like flames catching dry brush. Some whispered in sympathy, others in fascination, but all relished the spectacle. By afternoon, London scandal sheets carried exaggerated renditions of the moment. Some painted Sophia as a desperate woman grasping above her station. Others framed Edmund's cruelty as further evidence of his untouchable nature. Sophia retreated to her aunt's home, allowing herself only a single moment of privacy to let tears fall before washing them away with resolute calm. She refused to let his judgment define her, though the sting of it echoed in her thoughts long after the words had faded into memory. Edmund, meanwhile, departed the party with the same rigid composure he had carried into it. Yet beneath that facade, a faint tremor of conflict stirred. He told himself he had acted out of necessity, preserving distance, preventing misinterpretation. Yet the image of Sophia's wounded dignity lingered with unwelcome persistence. He had not expected her silence to feel heavier than any argument she might have made. Night settled over London with its usual cacophony of carriage wheels, distant bells, and restless murmurs from ballrooms and taverns alike. Sophia sat by her window, watching lanterns flicker against the rain-slick streets, and vowed that she would not let cruelty determine the course of her season. Whether society offered kindness or condemnation, she would face it with the strength her father had once admired in her. She would attend the charity ball at Carlton House. She would hold her head high, and she would remember that worth was not bestowed by a duke's careless words. Yet even as she whispered these promises into the dim quiet of her room, she could not shake the memory of Edmund's voice, nor the unsettling certainty that their fates, somehow, were now irreversibly entwined. The weeks that followed the Viscountess's garden party unfolded with a quiet tension that clung to every corridor, ballroom, and drawing room Sophia entered. Though the sting of the Duke's brutal dismissal still echoed in her memory, she refused to surrender to the easy path of retreat. Instead, she immersed herself in charitable work alongside her aunt, offering her time to orphanages and veterans' widows, tasks unlikely to draw admiration from society, yet ones that reminded her she was more than a vessel for gossip. Her graceful perseverance began to soften the whispers. People regarded her not as a fallen heiress scrambling for advantage, but as a woman of uncommon poise who refused to let cruelty define her. Still, each outing demanded courage. The world she moved through felt altered, as though her humiliation had tinted every glance with judgment or pity. But beneath her calm surface lived a quiet ember of determination, glowing brighter each time she straightened her shoulders and walked forward. Edmund was not blind to her resilience. He encountered her more often than he wished, for their social circles inevitably overlapped. At musicales, at exhibitions, at formal teas, she was always there, never flaunting herself, never seeking attention, simply existing with a dignified composure that unsettled him. He had expected her to crumble, to retreat, perhaps to use her embarrassment as a means to garner sympathy. Instead, she moved with an inner steadiness he could neither ignore nor explain. He found himself observing her when he should not have been watching at all. She listened attentively when others spoke, never interrupting, never indulging in petty gossip. She laughed rarely, but when she did, it was soft and genuine, a sound that lacked the manipulative sweetness he had grown accustomed to in society's games. Each sight of her pressed against his consciousness, tugging at instincts he had trained himself to silence. He attempted to justify his interest as a simple assessment of character, a matter of curiosity rather than sentiment. Yet curiosity alone could not account for the faint disquiet that stirred in him whenever Sophia appeared across a room. He would catch himself glancing toward her, only to quickly avert his gaze when she turned her head. His upbringing had conditioned him to view personal vulnerability as a failing, a dangerous trait that invited disappointment. His father's stern lessons echoed in his mind. Trust no one, reveal nothing, offer your heart to no one who might find advantage in holding it. But Sophia did not fit neatly within those rigid boundaries. She neither pursued him nor shunned him. Instead, she moved through London's elite as though she carried an invisible weight, yet bore it with an elegance he found disconcertingly admirable. Her name resurfaced in conversation more frequently as the Carlton House charity ball approached. The event represented the pinnacle of the early season, drawing noble families from across England, each eager to display their rank, wealth, and taste. Sophia's attendance became a topic of speculation. Some questioned whether she would risk facing renewed scrutiny. Others predicted she would attempt to secure a match to counteract the damage of Edmund's words. But Sophia prepared for the ball with a quiet resolve that owed little to public opinion. She had promised herself, on that rain-streaked night by her window, that she would not retreat into the shadows. She would face the ballroom, the music, the polished gazes, and stand among them as though her life had not been cracked open by a single devastating sentence. On the evening of the event, Carlton House shimmered with light as a cascade of chandeliers cast gold across marble floors. Silk and velvet swept through the halls in waves of color, accompanied by the rustle of fans and the soft buzz of polite conversation. Sophia entered the grand room at her aunt's side, her gown of pale blue satin catching the glimmer of candlelight. She inhaled slowly, gathering courage with each breath. Though she had prepared herself for stares, the actual moment of stepping into that radiant space felt like stepping into the center of a storm. Conversations muted. Fans paused mid-flutter. Her humiliation at the garden party had granted her an unintended notoriety, and every eye seemed eager to evaluate whether she would falter. But she did not. She moved with deliberate calm, acknowledging acquaintances with gentle nods. No suitor approached to claim her for the first dance, though several looked as though they wished to before retreating under the pressure of the whispered scandal. Sophia felt the familiar ache of isolation, but refused to let it soften her resolve. She found comfort in the music, letting its elegant rhythm steady her heartbeat. Her aunt, sensing her tension, offered a reassuring squeeze of the hand before drifting away to speak with old friends. From the opposite side of the ballroom, Edmund noticed her immediately. The sight of her, serene yet solitary, struck him with unexpected force. He had expected embarrassment or timidity, perhaps a reluctance to enter such a dazzling arena so soon after the public blow he had dealt her. Instead, she appeared almost luminous in her quiet strength. A flicker of something, regret, admiration, he could not name it, stirred beneath his composed exterior. He turned away, but the image lingered, refusing to release him. As the orchestra began a waltz, couples flowed onto the floor, swirling in elegant patterns. Sophia remained where she stood, watching with a muted longing she tried to suppress. Then, with a breath that felt both terrifying and necessary, she stepped forward. Alone. The gesture was small, but in a ballroom governed by rigid expectations, it was a daring act. She moved with gentle precision, following the introductory measures of the exhibition dance meant to lead the evening's festivities. The room, slowly and then completely, fell silent. Guests watched as she glided through the steps, not with ostentation, but with a serenity so striking it demanded admiration. Her movements carried the quiet defiance of a woman who refused to be diminished. Edmund felt something shift within him, an almost imperceptible crack in the armor he had spent years constructing. Her grace unsettled him, stirring memories of emotions he had banished. He watched her with an intensity that startled even him, yet he could not look away. When the music faded, The applause blossomed hesitantly, then gathered strength, filling the hall with acknowledgement of her courage. It was not a triumph she had sought, yet it arrived all the same. As Sophia stepped back from the floor, her breath unsteady but her expression composed, Edmund found his pulse quicken in a way he had not experienced in years. Her quiet rebellion against humiliation left him oddly breathless, as though the certainty he had always relied upon had begun to shift beneath his feet. Something had changed, not only in Sophia's standing among society, but in the carefully guarded chambers of his own heart. He did not yet understand the transformation, but he sensed it would not be easily undone. In the days following the Carlton House ball, Sophia found herself watched with a new kind of curiosity, one tempered with reluctant admiration. Where once society had whispered about her misfortune, it now murmured of her unexpected courage. She did not revel in the change, for triumph born of necessity never tasted sweet, yet she could not deny a faint sense of vindication. The waltz she had danced alone had not been an act of defiance, but of survival, a reclaiming of dignity. Still, the attention unsettled her. She had never sought to captivate London. She had merely longed to endure it. And though the applause had faded, shadows of expectation lingered wherever she went. Edmund, meanwhile, found himself grappling with an unfamiliar disquiet. At the ball, he had felt something shift like a door he had long kept bolted, suddenly giving way beneath an unexpected force. Sophia's solitary dance had etched itself into his thoughts, returning to him in the quiet moments between obligations, when he should have been focused on parliamentary proposals or estate correspondence. It troubled him how vividly he recalled the calm set of her shoulders, the graceful movement of her hands, the resolute glimmer in her eyes. He told himself it was mere curiosity, the mind's fascination with strength in adversity, but the explanation rang hollow. What settled deeper, though he tried to deny it, was a dawning respect that unsettled the cold edges of his composure. Their next meeting occurred without orchestration or ceremony. Sophia had accompanied her aunt to the British Museum, seeking a quiet refuge among ancient relics and dusty manuscripts. She wandered through the grand hall, drawn to exhibits that whispered of civilizations long gone, where triumphs and tragedies were frozen in stone rather than splashed across society columns. The vast stillness soothed her, offering relief from the scrutiny she had endured for weeks. As she paused before an ornate Greek amphora, studying the faded images of myths etched across its surface, she sensed rather than saw someone approaching. Turning slightly, she found Edmund standing a few paces away, his presence unmistakable. His posture was rigid, as though he feared even a breath might betray some private conflict. For a moment, neither spoke. Their last exchange, brutal, humiliating, hovered between them like a shadow. "Lady Aldridge," he began, his voice taut with restraint, "I wish to speak with you." Sophia inclined her head with polite calm, though her heart tightened. "Of course, Your Grace." He drew nearer, stopping at a respectful distance. His gaze flicked toward the amphora, as though seeking refuge in the art before returning to her. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. The words sounded as though they had been pried from him. "My conduct at the Viscountess's gathering was unpardonably harsh." Sophia's breath caught. She had expected avoidance, not contrition. "Your words were certainly plain," she replied, her tone even, neither accusing nor forgiving. His jaw tightened. "They were inexcusable. I spoke out of a misguided conviction that honesty, however severe, was preferable to ambiguity. But I recognize now that cruelty disguised as clarity is still cruelty." Sophia observed him carefully. His apology felt sincere, yet incomplete, as though deeper truths lay buried beneath layers he could not yet unearth. "I accept your apology," she said softly, "but I hope you understand that I never approached you with expectations. I have never sought your pity or your favor." His gaze darkened, not in anger, but in a kind of troubled introspection. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "Your conduct since that day has revealed a strength that I had not anticipated." She did not respond immediately, unsure how to navigate the unexpected shift. She sensed the weight pressing on him, the careful control he exerted even in his contrition. It softened her, if only slightly. Their conversation might have ended awkwardly had the museum not offered them a natural reprieve. A nearby guide began explaining the amphora's imagery to a small group, his voice rising just enough to interrupt their tension. Sophia stepped aside, allowing the crowd to pass, and Edmund moved with her, almost unconsciously falling in a step beside her. Over the next several minutes, they wandered through adjacent galleries, their dialogue hesitant but meaningful. He asked about her interest in antiquities. She spoke of her father's fondness for ancient literature. She inquired about his parliamentary work. He offered a measured explanation of a new trade proposal he was supporting. Their words were formal, yet beneath them flowed an undercurrent of curiosity neither dared acknowledge. When they paused before a display of Roman jewelry, Edmund spoke again, quieter this time. "Your dance at Carlton House. It was remarkable." Sophia's cheeks warmed despite her attempts at composure. "It was necessary," she said. "I wished only to stand without trembling." "You succeeded in more than that," he replied. There was something fragile in his voice, as though honesty strained against the habits of restraint. She glanced at him, searching his expression, and found not arrogance, but a hint of vulnerability. It startled her. "Then I am glad," she said softly, "that my actions were not entirely in vain." Their conversation continued until her aunt approached, gently reminding Sophia of an appointment. Edmund bowed, his expression unreadable, and she curtsied in return. As she left the museum, she felt a flicker of something she struggled to name. A cautious hope, perhaps, or the fragile beginning of understanding. In the days that followed, their paths crossed with increasing frequency. Edmund found reasons to linger a moment longer when offering a greeting, to hold a door he might otherwise have ignored, to ask a question he could easily have left unspoken. Sophia, though wary, could not deny that his demeanor had shifted. The coldness she once felt radiating from him seemed tempered now by a softened attentiveness, a quiet curiosity that manifested in small but unmistakable gestures. Yet uncertainty remained. Each time Edmund seemed on the verge of saying something more, an admission, a sentiment, he recoiled, retreating into the safety of formal civility. Sophia sensed the internal war within him, a battle between ingrained caution and unspoken desire. His eyes betrayed thoughts he would not voice. His posture revealed tension he tried to hide. And though Sophia felt a growing warmth toward him, she restrained herself, determined not to misinterpret gestures that might be nothing more than courtesy. Meanwhile, the city's fascination with their interactions grew. Scandal sheets printed half-truths, inventing stories of secret courtship or impending proposal. Sophia tried to ignore them, but Edmund read each one with increasing irritation. He loathed the idea that her reputation might again be dragged through speculation because of him. Their simmering tension reached its breaking point when Edmund, upon overhearing two gentlemen insinuate that Sophia's newfound admiration stemmed from desperation, confronted them with a ferocity that shocked even himself. His sharp rebuke silenced the room, but it also exposed something undeniable. He cared whether or not he was ready to accept it. That evening, Sophia received word of his outburst, delivered by a friend who recounted it with a mixture of amusement and awe. She felt a tremor of emotion, gratitude, confusion, perhaps something deeper. Edmund might resist his own heart, but his actions spoke in ways he could not hide. As night settled over London, both found themselves restless. Edmund stared into the dying embers of his hearth, grappling with the truth he had tried so long to deny. Sophia sat by her window once more, watching the city's pulse shimmer beneath the moonlight. Their thoughts, though unspoken, reached toward the same uncharted horizon, each wondering what lay beyond the fragile beginning that neither dared yet name. In the aftermath of Edmund's unexpected defense of her reputation, Sophia found the rhythm of her days subtly altered, as though some invisible thread had begun drawing their lives closer with each passing hour. She felt his presence even when he was not near, in the softened tone of acquaintances now hesitant to speak ill of her, in the thoughtful glances cast her way at soirees, and most strikingly, in her own restless thoughts. Where once she had regarded him with caution or wounded pride, she now found herself wondering what storm of emotion brewed beneath his immaculate composure. Yet with every new sign of his growing attachment, a counterweight of doubt tethered her heart. Edmund was a man shaped by discipline and scars, and she knew better than to mistake fragments of vulnerability for the promise of devotion. Lord Royston, however, saw matters with far less nuance. Ambitious and prideful, he had long-eyed Sophia not out of admiration, but because her renewed acclaim made her a coveted prize. His bruised vanity at being overshadowed by Edmund's chivalrous display festered into resentment. In private corners of gentlemen's clubs and dimly lit parlors, he lamented that society seemed too eager to forget Sophia's earlier disgrace. That the Duke, aloof, unyielding Edmund Harrow, should shift so visibly in her favor only deepened Royston's irritation. It was not affection he desired, but victory, and in his eyes, Sophia had become a challenge he was determined to claim or ruin. The tension came to a head one humid afternoon outside White's Gentlemen's Club, where Edmund stepped into the sunlight only to find Royston waiting. Their exchange began with brittle civility, yet the conversation soured quickly. Royston insinuated that Sophia's restored reputation was undeserved, that the Duke's ill-advised gallantry had inflated her importance. Edmund's voice, normally controlled to the point of austerity, sharpened. He warned Royston to speak with respect. Royston, flushed with anger, accused him of hypocrisy, of pretending disinterest in a woman he clearly intended to pursue. And with that final barb, he issued a challenge thinly veiled as an invitation to defend his honor. Edmund's refusal only inflamed matters further. Royston twisted the refusal into a taunt, spreading whispers among onlookers that the Duke protected Sophia's name only when it cost him nothing. By evening, rumors of a near-duel hummed through London like wasps disturbed from their nest. Sophia heard of the confrontation the next morning from her aunt, whose troubled expression made her heart clench. She felt both fear and disbelief. The idea that Edmund might risk his life or reputation because of her was unthinkable, yet the evidence sat before her in the form of society's newest whispers. She longed to confront him, to ask whether it was true, whether he had truly stood on the edge of violence for her sake, but propriety offered no such freedom. The answer came sooner than expected. At the final soiree of the season, a glittering affair hosted by the Duchess of Weatherby, Sophia entered the ballroom to find a storm brewing beneath its polished surface. Conversations hushed as she passed, eyes following her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. She felt the pressure of their attention like a weight upon her spine. Then, across the sea of silks and chandeliers, she saw Edmund. He stood near the central staircase, his posture sharper than usual, as though he had made a decision that left no space for hesitation. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Sophia felt the room blur around them. She moved toward him with measured grace, her heartbeat quickening despite her attempt at composure. Before she could speak, Edmund stepped forward, his voice carrying through the ballroom with a clarity that commanded attention. "Lady Aldridge," he said, bowing with reverence so unmistakable it scattered the murmurs like startled birds. "May I have a moment?" The request alone was daring, but what followed stunned them all. Edmund turned to face the crowd. "There have been falsehoods circulated regarding Lady Aldridge's conduct," he announced, his tone solemn but unwavering. "I will not allow such dishonor to persist." The rumors were engineered by a man who sought to elevate himself at the cost of her dignity. Gasps rippled through the hall. Royston, lurking at the edge of the crowd, blanched. Edmund continued, unyielding. "Let it be known that the forged letters and whispered slander originated with Lord Royston. His attempts to tarnish Lady Aldridge's character were deliberate, motivated by vanity and resentment." Royston sputtered in protest, but the Duke's authority and the evidence he had quietly gathered left little room for rebuttal. The room shifted, turning away from Royston with thinly veiled contempt. Sophia stood in stunned silence, her hands trembling at her sides. Edmund's public defense was not merely gallantry. It was vulnerability laid bare for all to see. When the murmurs finally settled, Edmund turned back to her. "Sophia," he said, her name spoken with a gentleness she had never heard from him. "Might I speak with you privately?" Led by instinct rather than thought, she nodded. He guided her toward the terrace, where lantern light flickered across the marble and a warm breeze stirred the trailing vines. The night felt suspended, as though it waited breathlessly for what would unfold. For several seconds, he said nothing, gathering the courage she sensed cost him greatly. Then he spoke, his voice low and unsteady. "I did not intend for you to matter to me," he confessed. "I built my life on control, on certainty. But you have undone more of me than I knew could be undone." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Edmund." He stepped closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "Those words I spoke at the garden party, words I hurled at you without thought for the pain they would cause, have haunted me. You were never unworthy. It was I who feared being worthy of you." Her breath caught, the world narrowing to the earnest intensity of his gaze. "Do not speak yourself into villainy," she murmured. "Your fears may have been unkind, but they were human." He exhaled shakily, as though her forgiveness loosened something bound tight within him. "I cannot pretend to know what the future will hold," he said, "but I know this. I wish to face it with you, if you will have me." The vulnerability in his voice washed over her like a warm tide. She felt the final remnants of doubt melt away. "Yes," she whispered, her eyes shining. "Yes, Edmund, I will." Relief and wonder flickered across his expression. He knelt, uncharacteristically, almost impulsively, drawing a soft gasp from Sophia. "Sophia Aldridge," he said quietly, "will you marry me?" Emotion overwhelmed her, swelling in her chest with exquisite force. "With all my heart," she replied. They rose together, hands trembling as they intertwined, the lanterns casting a golden glow over the moment that would soon echo through London's endless whispering halls. And as they stepped back into the ballroom, no longer as strangers caught in the cross-currents of pride and misunderstanding, but as partners stepping boldly into their future, the room erupted into applause that felt less like celebration and more like fate acknowledging what had finally come to pass.